Well, good evening. My name is Spencer Cody. I teach 7 through 12 science at Edmond Central in Roscoe. For those of you who don't know who I am, I taught for 11 years in Hoven, so I see some Hoven faces here. That's great. And this is my 15th year of teaching 7 through 12 science. My background is in biology. So my undergrad was biology from Concordia in Moorhead, Minnesota, and chemistry at the graduate level in SDSU. And I live in Mina with my 2 daughters and my wife. And that's most of what about me anyways. One of the great things about teaching science is that, if you're lucky anyways, you get to do science. So, you know, we have this expectation, well, if you're actually going to teach science to students and actually get them connected to science, that you actually have to be on research teams, you actually have to do research, you have to present on science. So I actually, compared to a lot of people in education, I get to do a lot of really cool things, which unfortunately aren't necessarily available to other areas in education, though they probably should be. So one of the great things about science is that we're always looking for things that we can either know to be true or not to be true. And actually, when you actually look at all the things you can actually measure, you can document, there's actually a lot of things in nature that you can. So it's the pursuit of attaining knowledge. That's what science means. It means it's the Greek word for knowledge, the accumulation of knowledge. But another area that I'm very passionate about is being a pro-life advocate. And I count myself as being a pro-life advocate for more than 20 years now. And it really goes back to my days in college, at Concordia College. And you can imagine, as some of you are going to find out or already know, college campuses are not very friendly environments for pro-life or any conservative viewpoint for that matter, be it religious or non-religious or whatever. A very hostile faculty, a very hostile environment. So, first of all, being from Veblen, South Dakota, a small town, that was a really big shock to me. Nobody really told me that was what you're walking into. But I'd say the day that I really became a pro-life advocate was for a bioethics course. We were required to go to both a pregnancy help center, so where they talk about options other than abortion, but then we also had to go to, you guessed it, Planned Parenthood, so that they got their part of the sandwich. That's to be fair. We did both. So we went to the Red River Valley Clinic, which is still the only abortion provider, the only Planned Parenthood abortion provider in North Dakota. So this is in Fargo. It's the same place. And that was really just kind of an eye-opener to me. I would consider myself pro-life up to that point, but I really wasn't active in the movement because I thought, well, I don't really agree with abortion. I think it's murder. I think it's not an ethical thing to do. But I do at least think that the people involved who work at Planned Parenthood, they mean well in their own way. And this was a real eye-opener because we weren't there to inspect the place. This wasn't a surprise inspection. I even asked the professor afterwards, did they know we were coming? Because what we saw was it was a little disconcerting. I mean, you have a group of college students. Most of them are almost all of them are going into science, many of them into the medical profession. You probably want to show the best face you possibly can for an abortion clinic. Well, we get there, and the place, and it's the same place, it's downtown. They literally picked the smallest building you could cram an abortion facility into and still legally be running. So in North Dakota, they have a law, and we have similar anti-coercion laws here in South Dakota, that state that if you sign all the informed consent forms and things like that, well, you can't do that in front of the boyfriend who brought you to get your abortion for obvious reasons. Well, they just thought that was a joke, and they told us that. So they have a waiting room that you couldn't fit these 4 chairs in. Well, the boyfriend who brings you in sits there. You sign all your paperwork saying that you're there by your own volition. That's a joke. And then, imagine the craziest person somebody I already knew, and I didn't realize she worked at Planned Parenthood, strictly did things for shock value, completely untrained. She was a student, same age I was. She was the one doing the counseling and doing the front desk, and really disturbed. She liked to keep track of how many abortions she could do in a week, how many she could schedule. She wasn't paid, but according to how many she scheduled. I said, I don't think so. But that was just a way of, just showing everybody she didn't care. Oh, got 3 more this week. It's like, well, maybe you just need a hug or something. I mean, that's sad. So just complete lack of any professional staffing. So who actually gave us the tour, she was the cleaning lady. There weren't any medical staff there. And she also told us, well, sometimes she helps with the abortions when they're a little short on staff. So the big part that she did was, well, if you have a later first term, in North Dakota, I'd imagine it's 13 weeks, 6 days, like you can do at Planned Parenthood here in South Dakota. So by that point in time, about 12, 13 weeks, a fetus is about 2 to 3 inches long. So in order to ensure that the abortion is actually complete, and don't worry, there aren't any pictures that are graphic or anything like this, but it needs to be explained. They have to put the pieces of the baby back together to make sure it was a complete abortion. Otherwise, there could be potentially serious concerns. They have to go back in and actually evacuate the remaining fetus. Well, having the cleaning lady, and her other job was cleaning at the nursing home, do that. I mean, I think we need a medical professional doing things like that, like a nurse. And that's what I assumed were the type of people who were doing these things, and that's just not the case. And why? Well, nobody in the medical profession who actually has a real career is going to want to work for Planned Parenthood. That's a career ender. If somebody's an abortion doctor, you have to really wonder, why are you an abortion doctor? So the reason they have to fly all their abortion doctors into South Dakota is there isn't a doctor in South Dakota who is willing to perform abortions. Same thing in North Dakota, same thing in a few other states. Our abortion doctors are from Minneapolis. They fly them into Sioux Falls. Once a week, we have different waiting periods and things like that, so it's time. So the doctor shows up on the day of the abortion, and she flies back to Minneapolis. Okay, so that's what really got me into the pro-life movement. Shortly thereafter, I worked with other people. It was really through our campus Republicans, really, we got our pro-lifers together and we came up with the Collegians for Life chapter. We did all sorts of educational things, and you just couldn't believe the outrage. I mean, it was just like, what? I mean, you have your views, I have my views, what's wrong with that? One thing that I always thought was interesting, we actually had a pro-life radio show. And this is a campus radio show, so nobody listens to campus radio. But, we had like a dozen hardcore followers, and they were all like really far lefty pro-abortion people who were just like screaming at their TV, like, change the channel. We have 200 stations. Why are you listening to us? So, but it was important. The message was there. And our chapter kept on growing and growing and growing, even on this very liberal campus. So it's very important that you're reaching out to other groups of people. I know, some of your parishes or churches or whatever have Respect Life groups and things like that, but maybe they're from a church like mine. I go to an ELCA church. I haven't ever even heard the word abortion from either one of my pastors' mouths. I mean, it's just an issue. What issue? What, abortion? Unplanned pregnancy? I haven't heard that either. So, it's just a non-issue because nobody wants to talk about it and they're scared to death of it. So it's important that we get outside and we talk to others as well. Came back to South Dakota to teach. Like I mentioned, I taught for 11 years in Hoven. Hoven is a very pro-life community, very long pro-life history there. I was an active member in the local chapter, and that's really what got me started in Right to Life. I saw they had a meeting to come to one of the Right to Life chapter Right to Life meetings, and eventually ended up at the state level. I did serve for one session as a lobbyist for South Dakota Right to Life. And, that really gets into things that you may not think were a big deal back then. And one of the bills that I fought really hard for that session wasn't a big deal. It was a ban on telemed abortions. Well, back in 2011, when I was the lobbyist, it was just starting in Iowa. We thought for sure we were going to get that overturned. That the American Medical Association would come in and say, "Well, you can't do this. This is insane." Well, we were wrong about that. We still haven't been able to stop them in Iowa. They expanded to Minnesota and a few other states, Alaska and a few others. So basically, a couple different ways. They can either prescribe it over, over the internet, and they can either mail the abortion pills to you for a chemical abortion, or you can actually go to a satellite facility and the doctor, the abortionist, hits a button and it opens up a little canister for the abortifacient. Okay, so a couple different ways there. They really wanted to get that going in the Dakotas because then they wouldn't have to send anybody from Minneapolis. Somebody in Minneapolis could push the button, there's your abortion. And just by chance, or by whatever, by design, I don't know. So what do you remember about 2020? The pandemic, whatever. How many of you know that abortions weren't being performed in South Dakota for 7 months? Yeah, so just, isn't that interesting how we didn't hear about that? You always hear these stories about, what if they ban abortion? Well, we did. We did for 7 months in South Dakota. And no, the world didn't implode. People didn't even know it was happening because we don't need abortion. There's no medical reason to have an abortion. Okay, so the interesting thing relating back to my one full year of lobbying anyways, is the reason they couldn't have abortions in South Dakota is because we didn't have telemedicine. It was illegal. Plenty of abortions occurring in Iowa, Minnesota. They couldn't send a doctor to South Dakota anymore because of the pandemic. So they shut it down from all the way through April through November, and they just reopened. So, the small things that you don't think are a big deal, maybe it is. Maybe it is talking to somebody that may have a really big impact. So that was just one bill that I worked on as a lobbyist. Well, after that, we had Debbie Pease as our lobbyist for a number of years, so I moved over to the lobby legislative committee, but I actually did more work with legislation. I worked on our 20-week abortion ban, testified for that on a number of circumstances. So one of the issues we have is trying to get, it's hard enough to get people to testify in Pure because during session, all the testimony days, they're on weekdays. Most people work and they're early in the morning and it's in Pure, which is very far away from just about everybody else. So it's very difficult to get anybody in there to testify, much less somebody with an embryology background or things like that. So I frequently have to come in and testify for South Dakota Right to Life. Does a 20-week-old fetus experience pain? You need to be able to explain this to legislators, and you need to be able to refute whoever NARAL brings in, or Planned Parenthood brings in, or whoever else comes in there. So I worked on that. I was able to write a couple of bills that got passed, like our sex selection abortion bans, so you can't pick and choose whether you want to have a male or a female, which is practice, unfortunately. You get what you get. So we can't use abortion to select whether you're going to have a male or a female. That's a big problem in China. It's a big problem in India. To such an extent, I'm going to talk more about humanizing the unborn, that there are many states in India and that you can't legally have a sonogram or an ultrasound because they don't want you to know, because the issue of aborting female babies is so out of control that it's just rampant. That's also why China relaxed their one-child policy, because they were getting too many males. Too many females were being aborted. And having a lot of males in a society that are young, that are outnumbering the females, is never a good thing. That leads to all sorts of instability. So we're seeing that problem. Another bill that is coming back up again, I also worked on, was a Down syndrome counseling bill. I see we're bringing that back again this session. We'll see where that goes. Currently, I am the South Dakota Right to Life treasurer. I've been the treasurer for the last 3 years, and it's a busy job, I guess, but it's great to see the impact that it has. I still do work with legislation, again, mostly science related. So like right now I'm working on some chemical abortion studies and things like that, because we have to line up testimony for that in the next couple of weeks. So why are we here today? Father did mention that. Well, 48 years ago, we're coming up on the big 50. This is even 10 years before me. I'm a Reagan baby, and we're still fighting it. The people I replaced on the board, they had been fighting it. And we're pushing back, but we're winning. So Roe, we all know about Roe v. Wade, but we probably don't know about Doe v. Bolton. So Roe v. Wade, you see the headline there, legalized abortion in all the states for the first 3 months. But what legalized abortion all the way up until birth was Doe v. Bolton, which the reason why people aren't familiar with that is both opinions were released on the same day. They were released on the same day, on the 22nd. So, and this has endless impacts. So Doe v. Bolton said that you could use any excuse to get an abortion. It didn't matter how late it was. As long as the child wasn't born, as in the head did not physically fit through the birth canal, you are not a human being, you can be aborted. And that's still the law in a number of states. I mean, we've had a lot of success in pushing back on that, but some of these states on the coast, it's just like Roe v. Wade and Doe v. Bolton just happened yesterday. It's the Wild West of abortion. You can get an abortion whenever you want, for whatever reason. And, we live in a federal society. States determine that up to a point, usually until NARAL or Planned Parenthood has a problem with it. So Roe had a 7-2 decision, is based on this right to privacy in the 14th Amendment. It was based on the trimester framework, which was so insane that even in 1992 with the Casey versus Pennsylvania decision, they had to throw that out and say, well, we're going to use viability, because that just doesn't even make any sense. So the idea was, in the first trimester, the decision to get an abortion was entirely between the doctor and the mother. The second trimester, you could have a few health restrictions on there because the state had more interest. The third trimester, the state had a much greater interest in the life of that unborn child. But again, people don't realize Doe v. Bolton. So Roe was based on Norma McCovey out of a Texas complaint. Doe v. Bolton was based on out of Georgia, which already had legalized abortion, but they wanted to get an abortion a later term and basically set this precedent that health of the mother wasn't physical health. It could be physical, but it could also be emotional, psychological, familial, the woman's age, anything relevant to that. And we've even seen that here in South Dakota. So we had that issue with when we were trying to pass the pain-capable Unborn Child Act, so basically a ban on an abortion before 20 weeks. There were people who testified. There was one person who testified in Rapid. She had an abortion because she wouldn't be able to work 2 jobs at a time if she actually had a kid. Well, we have a huge gaping loophole here you can drive a bus through. I mean, that's insane. I mean, and they use it. So the impacts are Roe and Doe right here. So this was before Roe and Doe, and this is where we are currently. Now this is progress. If you would have went back, well, if you would have just even looked at this map 10 years ago, you would have seen much looser abortion restrictions than that. So in South Dakota, abortion except for life of the mother was illegal. But there were a number of states where it was legal, and it just depended on the state. Currently, abortion except to save the life of the mother in South Dakota is illegal beyond 20 weeks. The vast majority of abortions in South Dakota occur before 13 weeks, 6 days. Because our law says 13 weeks, and Planned Parenthood took that extra 6 days because they can. That's how they operate. Assuming that they're accurately identifying the age of the fetus. Okay, so, this is progress. But notice, there's states, there's no limit. If you want to get an abortion, late-term abortion in Colorado, you can. Again, the key thing is, according to most abortionists, the head has to still be in the birth canal, or that's infanticide, and that's a line most abortionists won't cross. We talk about Gosnell and things like that, and that's why he ended up going to prison, because, well, he saw that line and he stepped right over it. So if you look through Roe, and the text is very interesting, and if you take any, do anything in law school or anything like that, it's a required read. It is interesting, but it's a little alarming that something from 1973 that's so backwardly written is still law of the land. I mean, it's written as completely devoid of science. And the reason why is because at the time, the American Medical Association, and especially before that time, they really had an anti-abortion stance. So the last thing they wanted to do was to dig up fetal science. Not that we knew that much about fetal science back then, because this really was the dark ages of fetal science. If you ever wonder where LMP comes from, the confusion between how long a gestation is, well, we approximately knew around when fertilization occurred, but there was so little known about embryonic development and things like that, even in 73, that it's pretty sparse for the science in this. But they're more afraid of what the science was going to say, because the AMA wasn't supportive of it. They were kind of changing their position late 60s, early 70s, but they didn't want the AMA opinion in there. So they went back and they looked at common law, so common English law, to determine abortion procedures. So they went back to quickening, the ancient term, the first time you actually feel that you have a child. So the child's actually moving. So usually that's about week 17 to maybe week 20. It just depends on the activity of the baby. I mean, that's a thousands of years old reference. Roe v. Wade, it's like the worst intersection of ignorance of science but ability to terminate life that you could ever imagine. So we had the technology to terminate life in the womb, but we didn't have enough technology to really actually even understand fully and appreciate when it began and how developed it was. It's really sad. But a lot of it had more to do with just, I don't want to dig in any deeper because I'm afraid of what I'm going to find. So read Roe. Read it. I mean, it is just ridiculous. They go back to, what did the ancient Greeks think about abortion? And what did the Romans think about abortion? What does that have to do with modern society? Nothing. So it's just really a silly decision. Even, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who passed last year, said Roe v. Wade was a terrible decision. The trimester framework was a disaster. She said, there'd be a lot more agreement on this issue if they would have just let the states decide and come to some consensus. They intervened too early. So there isn't wide-scale support of it. It's just that, obviously if you want abortion on demand, that's kind of what you have to support, a really, really bad decision that's, on par with like the Dred Scott decision. It's disgusting. Okay, so my presentation is a little bit on humanizing or rehumanizing the unborn through science. And just one area that has really made a difference, and if you look at those laws that have changed, we've added restrictions, we've added a lot of education measures. The abortion rate has dropped dramatically throughout the country, also especially South Dakota. So the abortion rate right now is about a fifth of what it was back in the early 80s in South Dakota. So it's dropped tremendously. Well, a lot of that has to do with just education, but also technology. So again, people were very ignorant of, when does life begin? Things like that. I mean, we had our beliefs from conception, but there wasn't really any direct proof of that. Well, now we actually have direct proof of that. And I'm just going to talk a little bit about ultrasounds and how that's actually played a big role in that. And actually, the ultrasound technology to be used for a developing baby, the whole idea came from Donald, who was a Scottish physician. And he reasoned, well, if we could actually use this technology for a developing fetus, that it would probably encourage people or discourage them from seeking abortion. So just to kind of show you the timeline relative to Roe and Doe. So remember, Roe and Doe, 73. The first ultrasound used for medical use wasn't until 56. We had ultrasound around, but it was used for mapping. The first ultrasound that they used on a human was initially designed to find defects in hulls on ships. So we really had to completely rethink about, well, wait, we could use this to diagnose people safely without using like X-rays, which is an ionizing radiation and other things like that. So early 70s, it was common to find it, ultrasound technology available in hospitals in the UK, but still not the United States. So again, early 70s, we're making these really big decisions about first 3 months, whatever you want to do, first 3 months. We don't know about what's really going on. So the law is way ahead of the science. It's not until late 70s that you are at all likely to actually have an ultrasound of a baby. I mean, we just take that for granted. Well, I'm going to go get my ultrasound. It's like, well, before 77, 78, that wasn't happening likely anywhere in the U.S. And if you look at some of the reason why is because the transducer and the technology was designed for mapping things in water or underwater. So early ultrasounds, you had to get into the dunk tank. It worked. It was great technology, but good luck marketing that. After that, we graduated to a giant bag filled with olive oil or some other liquid that would actually work with the transducer. Again, these are not common in the U.S. You could find them only at very large hospitals. It was not something you would just you would have as a checkup on fetal development. And so this technology was not around. Well, look at the advances here. So this is a sonogram through the years. So 63, 68, 76, you can kind of make out the cranial cavity. 78, by the time we got to the late 70s, we actually had grayscale, so you could actually distinguish a little bit more. Again, these are all two-dimensional scans, so you're still going to need a tech to interpret it for you. In fact, that was a big concern, that there was always somebody there to interpret it for you, because you could really, misinterpret what you're seeing. Look, by 85, you can actually see a spine there. 1990, you can count the individual vertebra and the ribs. Look, it's life. 99, by the time we get to the 90s, we actually had digital displays. And the important thing about a digital display is that you can actually filter out a lot of the background. Again, you're always sending all these high-pitched waves at a very fast rate, so you're going to get a lot of, resonance issues and things like that. 2001, I remember the first HD images that started to come out back in the early 2000s. Very muddled, but it was really neat to see. And this is where we are today. I mean, our technology is so good, and this isn't necessarily what we use for diagnostics, because we don't need this. We still use, for diagnostics, we frequently just use a really good 2D, two-dimensional. We don't necessarily need 3D or 4D. And what they mean by 4D, so to get the full facial features, to actually see what you look like, is we take that scan over time, and then it's just pieced together. Well, you need very good computers and processors to do that. So, and you can see some of these images here. I mean, if you actually want to see what your baby is going to look like a few weeks before they're actually born, you can now. That's how good this technology is. And of course, what we know now about fetal development is that quickening thing, that's week 20, good grief. That's not even legal to get an abortion in most states now. So much of that development occurs in the first trimester. That's why they always talk about fetal alcohol issues and smoking and things like that early in a pregnancy, because that's when you can do the damage. That's when all your body systems are formed. After that, you're just putting on weight. One of the last things to develop, about week 21, week 22, are your lungs, and that's kind of that's the viability. And we pushed that back. So viability used to be well after 24 weeks. Now it's up to 21 weeks in some rare cases. So the science has really changed, and it's really pushing views. We see this time and time again. So what are some things that you can do? Well, you can educate yourself. There's so many people just, they have all these assumptions that abortion is this or this is that, or depends on which state you're in. It's a very different situation once you cross the border. Okay, so you need to educate yourself. Social media is big. It's really been big in the news about how much censoring we've been doing through Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and even Snaps, I see. That's not new. We've had just even to run ads and things like that. For example, Facebook's community standard says you can't actually show a sonogram. You can't have it in an ad. It's like there's nothing. It's a sonogram. It's an ultrasound. It's not an abortion. I could maybe see not showing an abortion, but so there's a lot of things they don't want out there for whatever reason that is. I mean, you can see some of the motivations behind what they're doing right now. Now people are finally catching on to what's actually going on. So social media, share those stories, share that information. Be very supportive of unplanned pregnancies, new mothers. Maybe it's something as simple as, you're going to offer to babysit one of those nights because they need to work or something like that. I mean, supportive of new mothers or expecting mothers. Educate people in our circle of influence. Who are your peers? Who are your coworkers? Organize or join a pro-life group. It could be a Respect Life group. It could be a Right to Life group. It could be whatever. You need to preach to people like me that go to a church and we don't have a pro-life Sunday. We don't have a pro-life month. We don't even know abortion's an issue. We know it is, but we don't talk about it. Contact your state and federal representatives. Whoever shows up to those committee meetings in the morning in Pierre, that's your voice. One thing you don't realize if you don't actually do lobbying in Pierre is that when you call your testimony in, that's when the legislators leave the room and they go get their snacks and they go to the bathroom. They don't even listen to you. Some do, and they're maybe listening to you. You need to be there in person. That means showing up. And no, you don't have to be a scientist. No, you don't have to just tell your story. And there's a bunch of pro-life bills coming up this session. So like Kristi Noem might be introducing a Down syndrome abortion ban, or a Down syndrome counseling bill we might be bringing back. And there's a number of other bills. Go to the Legislative Research Council website. All the bills are on there. You can just search things by key term, abortion or whatever. Show up to those testimony. That has a huge influence on legislators. I've seen bills completely get demolished just because of who showed up and who didn't. And testify in session. So, you know, it's talking to your legislative officials, it's actually showing up. So that's pretty much my presentation. Did anybody have any questions? If you do, if you have anything afterwards, you can always email me. My email's up there. Certainly welcome anybody who is interested in getting involved in the pro-life movement. We have a local chapter that certainly could be more active. It's partly my fault there too, because I'm so busy at the state level. But any questions? Anybody have any questions? Yes.
In 1970, I was a student at Presentation College studying to be an RN. And we had 200 students, some of them were Vietnam vets on the GI Bill, men, and they'd see the worst of Vietnam. We had a sociologist come from New York, and he had to get permission from the Presentation Sisters to show the abortion film. And I might cry when I tell you this. So nobody was prepared for what we were going to see, because this was a live abortion. Not the nice ones. None of them are nice. They're horrific. But this graphic. So 200 of us students sat and watched this abortion because the sisters had to vote on the permission for this man to do this. It was the most gut-wrenching, vile, wicked thing I've ever experienced in my life. People were leaving to go to the bathroom because they were physically sick and they were crying. Big men, tough men who'd been in Nam. So I sat in my car and I thought about it. So when we moved to Nebraska, I was involved with pro-life for 20 years. We had lobbyists, we walked, we did it in our house, we had meetings, we prayed, we did the Red Rose, we walked the streets of Nebraska, which was not popular in the 70s or 78. And then tonight, I kept thinking, I don't know if I want to go, I don't feel good. So I watched, and then I'll be quiet. Father Jeffrey Kirby from South Carolina, who does Lily Productions, and he streamed a live video tonight. It was the best pro-life talk I've ever heard in my life. And it shook me to the core again. And he was talking about today, January 20, 2021. And he was telling us Catholics that our inauguration is the Holy Sacrifice, the Mass, but we got to get involved. We can no longer sit and just be complacent. We have to do something. No matter what it is, no matter how the Spirit leads us. So if anybody gets a chance tonight, go to that. It's on YouTube. This man is very passionate, and he said bluntly, we cannot, as Americans, on the back of 50 million babies, be more worried about our economy and our executive privilege and et cetera, et cetera. We have to worry about these babies. And that's why I'm here tonight. I could not be here. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. Yep, so I wasn't going to show anything of an actual abortion procedure. That stuff's out there. Google tries to hide it and things like that, so you're not going to find it if you say, like, Google baby A, but Gosnell baby A, some of the evidence they actually had to bring forth in federal district court, it's there. live action, all their videos, all they could get them was that they misrepresented their identities. Not that any of it was not true. So, again, all that wasn't out there when I was in college. So we just, it was kind of a shock for me to actually see how bad Planned Parenthood was run. Any other questions? Okay. Well, thank you for inviting me.
Thank you, Mr. Cody, for being here today. Thank you for your pro-life witness. And also, just want to affirm you in the years that you've dedicated since your time as a university student, as an educator, and being involved in pro-life. And thank you for, teaching us, because the material that was covered tonight, you won't get this material in your classroom. This is something that as a church organization we're able to support, because this is part of our church's teachings about the dignity of human life and what we say the sin or evil of abortion, and it's a true scourge. And appreciate you, Mr. Cody, for bringing this. This is something that's bad for America, but it's bad for those children. It's bad for families. Abortion hurts women. Abortion hurts the unborn. And so I'm glad tonight for this scientific explanation and to show us how far we've come in the last 48 years. And we want to look to the future with hope as we give a pro-life witness. And so there are other ways you can be involved. And the first one I would point out to you, and this is information, if you take one of these newspapers right here, I encourage you to take one of these. On Sunday, January 31st, right here in South Dakota, in Pierre, the South Dakota Right to Life has a walk for life. This is a beautiful opportunity to get involved. Margaret shared her experience being involved in the pro-life movement of doing a walk for life. If you've ever been at a pro-life experience, I encourage you to participate. And we have one regionally in Pierre, and that's on Sunday, January 31st at 2 p.m. There are a couple of keynote speakers, and I encourage you to get information and participate at something at the local level. Another thing that you can do, because some of you are going to go to college, you're going to travel, you might move different places. Sometime in your life, you may have the opportunity to go to the National March for Life, which takes place in Washington, D.C., and that will also be taking place this next week. The first time I went to the March for Life, and I was around 500,000 people, 500,000 people all together. It is one of the largest national action in Washington, D.C. of people together united in a pro-life witness. And there are people that are students here that are 12, 11, 10 years old. There are people of all ages at the National March for Life. And it is something that in my own experience, I was emotionally touched and I was moved to tears at the power of the pro-life witness. And one of the most powerful witnesses at the National March for Life is you get to the end of the march right before you come to the national capitol, where all our congressmen and senators, where they make decisions to lead our country. And there is a line of men and women who are holding signs, and they say, "I regret having an abortion." And there are a lot of people, and it takes a lot of power, a lot of strength, a lot of courage for those people to stand up in front of 500,000 people and to say, "I'm one of the people that made a bad decision in my life, and I lost my child. I made a decision to cooperate in taking the life of my child, my unborn child, and it's something that they regret." If anyone you know has ever made that bad decision, has made that mistake, we offer free counseling and supportive services to help people heal from that experience, because that is something that leads people to have depression, anxiety disorders. It can lead to addictions later in life. So part of our pro-life night and our pro-life witness is to let you know that the church makes available all the resources to help someone. And you never know. You may have a coworker someday and they're going through a lot, and that might be something that's in their past and they need healing from that. They may need counseling for that. We will provide them support services if they want them. We can't force anybody to do anything they don't want to do, but being pro-life means we want to help those people get those resources. We also have Rachel's Vineyard Retreats, which is a retreat where men and women who have had that as part of their experience can come and receive counseling, support, and encouragement, and they can also have the opportunity to be welcomed back into the church, because just because people sin and make bad decisions doesn't mean that they can't turn away from their bad decisions and come back to God. Just like we go to confession here in our church, people can receive that healing of forgiveness even if they've done something with abortion. And that's a powerful act of mercy. And as a priest, I've been a part of that, and it is powerful to see people's lives transformed, to be freed from the shackles of shame and depression and addiction, so that they can come back and be freed and receive those forgiveness that comes from our gracious and loving God. So I'm so grateful for you guys being here tonight. Again, I want you guys to help yourselves to the materials we have there, these pro-life witnesses. And on Friday is the day that we commemorate and pray for the legal protection of the unborn. So that is coming up on Friday. It's a national day. It is something that even in our state legislature has been honored. I know right here in South Dakota, our current governor, Kristi Noem, has said that she wants to protect the unborn. She's talked about that in her national address, or State of the State address just this year. But it's also a day where we can pray for people who have undergone an abortion. We can pray for protection. We can pray for a restoration of the rights for the unborn. And you can also offer sacrifices. So like on Friday during Lent, we do fasting. We unite our prayers with fasting. That's something we can do this Friday coming up, as we can pray for the unborn. And if you want to remember to do that, I encourage you, take one of these pro-life bracelets, these blue or white bracelets, and wear that on Friday. And if someone asks you about it, you can say, I believe in protecting human life. I'm a pro-life person, and I'm going to make sacrifices. And in fact, I wear this band around my hand on Fridays because it's a day I dedicated in my prayer and my activities to the pro-life movement. That's a powerful way of praying, and that's something we can do as members of our church. We also have the Life Runners. That's a beautiful apostolate in the church where we offer our bodies as a living sacrifice to God, where we do prayer and exercise. We can become great athletes, but we can also offer that up as a sacrifice to God. And the national leader of the Life Runners, Pat Castle, he's from South Dakota. He's going to be at that state march or walk for life at the end of the month. So I encourage you, lots of great opportunities. And of course, I think Edmonds County is a pro-life hub. And I think we can get our regional pro-life chapter and Right to Life chapter abuzz with activity. I'm so grateful for all of you being here tonight. At this moment, I'm going to dismiss the assembly. And one thing that we do in our prayer in our church is we pray the prayers of the Holy Rosary. And of course, many of you, some of our students have been praying the Rosary your whole life. You remember praying the Our Father prayer, the Hail Mary prayer, which comes from the Gospel of Luke. Any non-Catholics here, that's okay. You're welcome to join us for that Rosary. And so this isn't compulsory, but at this time, I'd like to invite all of you guys to head over to Holy Cross Church, just like we normally do. And we're going to pray the Rosary for Life tonight, and then we're going to conclude tonight as we dedicate this time together for the unborn. Again, I want to thank Mr. Spencer Cody for his awesome presentation and for his pro-life witness. Give him a round of applause, and thanks for coming here tonight. I'm going to say a short prayer, and then I'm going to ask you guys to just head right on over to the church. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Lord Jesus, we thank you for the gift of human life, and we ask that you would fill us with strength and courage to be pro-life and to serve the dignity of the human person. We ask that you would give us the courage of all those who have gone before us in the pro-life movement, that we too, inspired by your creation, would be witnesses to the world of your plan for human life. We ask all this in Jesus' name, amen. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. And at this time, we'll now pray the Rosary for Life, and so I encourage you, just head right across the street into Holy Cross Church, and we'll begin in just 4 minutes. So let's head over there quick. And grab some of these delicious things and things right here on the way out. There's some suckers and things like that there. We also have these models of unborn children that you can have, and I encourage you, these are really a great thing to have. These are what a child looks like at 12 weeks old, and so I encourage you guys to take one of these. These are anatomically correct, and when you pray the Rosary, this is a great thing to have, and help yourself to a t-shirt. I got plenty of them there.
The National Walk for Life is now virtual.
All right.
It's not even live. So
Okay.
anybody can go online and do it.
All right, and I was just informed this year, because of the pandemic, the National March for Life is virtual, so you can participate on that online. So that's a great thing. But let's head on over, guys. Head on over across the street. Logan and Chris, you lead the way. Push those doors open, would you?
Yeah, we talked about it at our meeting on Monday.
Wasted breath beneath my chest, I wasn't able to hear your words unsatisfied. You left your faith next to your glass out on the table, and only one of them survived.